How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and today we're taking a look at something very different. We're looking at Star Wars Unlimited. This is a game I've been playing recently and only just now came out, and I'm super excited to talk about it. This has been what I've been doing more actually than playing Magic or CDH or any of that. I've really got hooked onto this game, and I really want to talk about it because I think it does a lot of things very smart. I specifically wanted to touch on its version of Commander, Twin Suns, its multiplayer format, and how I think it gets a lot of things right that for a lot of Commander players, Commander itself gets pretty wrong. You can look at this video as a follow-up to some of my Commander design flaw videos that I've done. If you haven't seen those, they're some of my oldest videos. You can check them out in the description below or up here. Might be easier to follow some of this video doing that, but yeah, we're just gonna dive into it, talk about some of the design flaws of Commander, and look at this game through a couple perspectives and how it relates to players. Thank you as always to my amazing patrons over on Patreon who help support me, get to make cool videos like this and other things that are maybe more topical for them. I get that not everyone's gonna be interested in this, but I had to talk about it, and I think a lot of you would really enjoy it. Like and subscribe if this is your vibe or you like Magic content, because I probably do that more often than this going forward, but either way, let's get into it. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. This is one of the best ways you can support the channel. And again, it's just free stuff. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. There's three main categories I want to talk about when discussing what this game offers. And in general, you can think about any game in terms of these three perspectives. And that is how it relates to player incentive, player experience, and player expectations. These aren't really so much like a sequence of things as much as they are like an ecosystem or a cycle of how you engage or look at a game, how you might think about it. Player incentive is loosely what a game incentivizes you to do. That's the optimization of a game. That's the, hey, I'm supposed to get my opponent dead. The objective of the game is that I win. Players will naturally try to optimize the game. Again, maybe consider checking out the design flaws of Commander video. I'll tie back to that a decent amount, but players are incentivized to do the best strategy or to find the best strategy to optimize winning. Talk about people optimizing the fun out of a game. It's not a failure of the players, it's a failure of the game. If your game, when optimized, is not fun, in sort of an objective design sense, your game isn't fun. And when that's the case, the player experience is probably not very fun. If the play patterns of, what the best thing is in your game isn't fun, yeah, your game's not going to be too fun. And a lot of times that's influenced by the expectations. If the expectation is, hey, this is a combat focused game where you're going to be playing units or creatures, whatever terminology, and you're going to be exchanging resources with your opponent and trying to eke out a win against them where you're both playing on a similar axis, and the game isn't that at all, there's going to be a really big disconnect from what you told the players they were supposed to do versus what they actually end up doing, and that can cause some issues. This isn't going to be a how to play guide exactly. The basic rules of the game, I'm assuming you're coming from Magic, or maybe you already play Star Wars Unlimited or a similar game. Very broadly, you build 50 card decks, both in 1v1 and in multiplayer. For now, they might change that later. In multiplayer, it is Highlander, meaning only one of each card, similar to Commander. Winning the game, as of right now at least, is very much just deal damage to your opponents. There isn't really a different axis you can play on of, there's no Thassa's Oracle, I win the game. Milling your opponents is a thing, but it doesn't immediately win you the game. Even that, when you would draw a card from an empty library or deck, you lose life. And even that follows on the same sort of axis that damaging people with creatures, or in this game, units, kind of works on. So all of the ways that a game can end, at least for now, are all tied together to that main core gameplay that I think most people are looking for in a card game, at least in the casual card game experience of, I'm gonna play a big old creature or a stormtrooper, a guy with a lightsaber, and I'm gonna attack you, and hopefully I'm gonna beat you, be able to blow up your TIE fighter and your X-Wing, and I'll be able to win by fighting you, instead of, we're gonna do a whole lot of that, and then, oh, that guy had Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breach, and now the game's just over, I guess. Nice that, as it is, there is no real way to side skirt this type of gameplay. The way that the multiplayer format Twin Suns ends is a little bit different. We will go over that, though the game does end once a player's life total is reduced to 0. But the general game plan is that you draw cards, put into play lands or ready resources that you use to play your cards. Though in this game, it's a little bit different in that you don't really have turns. Everybody is playing actions back to back. So everything you do is an action, whether it's playing a card from your hand or attacking with one of your units, or are using one of your leader abilities. Everything's an action. I take an action, then the person next to me takes an action, then the person next to me takes an action. And there isn't a, I take a turn, I do all my stuff I can do, pass to you, you take a turn. So a real back and forth, and that we do until we're done. And then we go to another turn, play a card from our hand as a resource, draw 2 cards each turn. How this game works, it takes some getting used to, but it feels really nice. And it really keeps things going. You become much less of a top deck war because I'm not going down 2 cards every time I do something, you know, land, play a spell, pass. Eventually I run out of things because I'm doing 2 cards a turn, and it keeps things moving. But again, this isn't going to be a how to play guide. There's plenty of those. I'll probably link one in the description, but we will be touching more on the rules as we go on. Because of all these things, the player incentives line up really well with what I think most casually minded multiplayer players are looking for. Combat is the way that you play. There are things that you do that aren't combat related. You can destroy a thing, mess with your opponents. There's ways to interact with people, but you aren't trying to do A plus B, kiki jiki this, I win the game now. There really isn't much of that. Again, maybe in 10 years, if I re-record this video, there will be. Doesn't seem like that's the direction they want to go. So that lines up really well with what you're sold. The pre-con sort of gameplay that you're sold of, that's what Commander is about, is currently what optimized Star Wars Unlimited gameplay actually looks like. Pushing for the win is very much rewarded. A weird tension in Commander is that it's a casual game, but there is a winner. And if I hit you, I don't really get much out of beating people up. I only get something out of winning the game in its entirety. One interesting thing about how this game ends is when one of your opponent's base is destroyed, you've dealt 30 damage to them. The game will end that turn, but in multiplayer, it doesn't end immediately because there's other players, right? So what'll happen is you'll remove damage from your base. You'll basically heal 5. And at the end of that turn, once one person is removed from the game is over and the person who has the most life remaining wins. It, 1, actually means that your life total matters and that it can kind of relate to who's in the lead, roughly. And 2 means that there's this sort of cat and mouse back and forth thing of I have to make sure I'm in a position to push for the win. And if I'm the one who starts it, I get rewarded because I get that 5 life bonus that puts me ahead, and I can try to set up a situation where I'm far enough ahead that other people can't come back once I've kind of started it. So really pushing for that win is important because the person who makes that first push actually is pretty rewarded. Is an experience I really like. And then also, this takes out the worst thing about Commander. Player removal is inherently non-casual. One thing I talk about in those other videos is how Commander is not a casual game. The games last an hour and a half, like on average. It's incredibly complex, which a lot of card games are. And there's player removal. I can die 20 minutes into our 90-minute game. What is casual about that? It makes an extreme tension in the gameplay of, you know, I don't really want to beat somebody up because then they're going to have such a negative experience that I kind of ruin their night. That is not in this game, and I think that's huge. The fact that the game ends when a player is removed and that the winning itself is kind of tied to a bit of a swingy, almost casual in itself way to win. The fact that other people can just decide that, hey, if we beat you all up, we'll make sure you don't win, kind of evens out the win rate of players, I think, in a way that will make the game inherently casual. I think creates an experience that is what a lot of people are looking for. You're incentivized to go for wins and to push for the game. You're not punishing somebody else by saying you don't get to play with the rest of us because the game's over when they're dead. And it's all this kind of swingy, silly way that the game ends that I think good competitively focused players will win more often, and they'll have to plan out their wins accordingly to do it. But I think casually minded players are going to be able to just get a win because of kind of the self-balancing nature of the multiplayer format. So because of these things, the player experience, I think, is way higher. Like I said, there is no player removal. That is one of the worst things about casual Commander. I can't stress that enough. I think it's terrible. It's actually one of the things that makes CDH feel better than fair Commander games because players aren't really often removed one by one. The game kind of ends when everybody else does, and that almost can make CDH games feel more player friendly than a casual game of Commander. We talked about the rules and how players take actions one at a time. I play my first unit or attack with my first unit, do my first action for the turn, and then immediately it's your turn. So that means it's non-stop action. There is no 30-minute turn while you do all your stuff and draw your cards and put out 50 dragons. It's all one at a time. So while in the later turns, if somebody pulls ahead, yeah, they might be taking more actions after you've kind of passed and ended your turn. There is no real long wait of your turn, my turn, their turn, their turn. Wait for it to get around the table, pass the turn. People are on their phones hanging, like just waiting for it to be their turn again. Everybody's kind of going together, and it leads to an interesting kind of swingy, dynamic interactiveness that even if I'm not necessarily playing something that messes with your board, I get to play things with a little bit more knowledge than maybe I would have in a game of Commander. It also makes turns, I think, more about what other people are doing, because you're much less likely to forget what other people are doing because there's not going to be an hour-long gap between your this turn and the last turn that you made. Things are going to be moving in a way that I think makes the game feel shorter, even if the games could technically still be as long as some Commander games. But I think in general they're going to be a lot shorter. And some rule stuff that we didn't talk about. There's actually a crazy amount of flexibility in the deck building because of how it works. We're going to get into that, but this game does have a system somewhat similar to Commander's color identity, but there isn't a better identity. There's no, oh, play 5 colors because it's better kind of thing. Everybody gets access to the same amount of colors, but they're not hard assigned to your leader that you choose. And in this mode, you get 2 leaders, which is another thing we'll touch on. So you have an insane amount of flexibility in terms of the cards that you get access to, even when you love one specific leader. Let's talk about that. Your leader. It's the main part of your deck, similar to Commander. This works the same in 1v1 though. This game is built around the concept of having a leader that defines your deck. Your leader is, for a lot of the game, an ability basically that you can use. If I play Luke Skywalker, I have the ability to give one of my units a shield each turn. If you've played games like Hearthstone or Legends of Runeterra, it's kind of similar to that in that you have an ability you can use once each turn, but then you get to deploy them as a unit at a certain point in the game. You don't even spend resources. It's just once you get to the point where everybody's at 6 or you're at 6 resources, hey, my Luke Skywalker gets to go into battle, and now he's like getting in there and swinging with them. It makes this very inherently like big swingy turn happen where it's like, okay, things aren't really working out for me, but I know Luke's about to come down and mess people up. It's pretty awesome. And your leaders also function as part of your deck building. So you see like Luke there has 2 little symbols on him. He's got this blue symbol, which means they get access to those cards, and this white symbol, which means they get access to those cards. All of the leaders will have a white or black symbol, meaning they're heroic or villainous. Basically, if they're a good guy, you get good guy cards. They're a bad guy, you get bad guy cards. There's more to the deck building, but we're not going to go super in depth there. But essentially, you get the colors that are on your leader, your other leader, because you get 2 in Twin Suns, and your base, which is basically just a way to show your life total. There's stuff that bases do, but again, we're not going to get into it. And they're essentially the way you get to assemble your color identity. So customization. If I want a deck, let's say I'm a big Boba Fett fan. I am. And I really want to play Boba Fett. I choose Boba Fett as one of my leaders. So because of this system that we have for customization, Boba Fett is not really restricted to any one type of deck. I can pair Boba Fett with Darth Vader to get access to his red cards or aggression cards, as well as getting to play with both of these cool characters and getting access to both of their abilities. And then if I choose a green base, then I get access to those green cards or command. I've built a Boba Fett deck that is not going to be the same as everyone else's Boba Fett deck. Mine is using yellow, red, and green cards, as well as black cards, like all Boba Fett decks do. And so this is my Boba Fett deck. It's going to be a little bit different than everybody else's. I'm going to get different colors. I'm going to get different cards to access to, and it's going to be pretty different because I'm going to get to use it with my other leader in different ways. That's kind of similar to Commander, but the cool thing is, you know, in Commander, if I love Corvold or Godo or whatever, they're still Godo, they're still Corvold. I only get those colors. That's what I'm stuck with. There's no changing it. Partners are kind of a thing, but they're broken. And in Commander, more is more. Just having more colors is inherently better. In this game, there isn't really a more colors or less colors though. If I really like Boba Fett, but I decide I kind of want to do things a little bit differently. I want to get access to, you know, I like having those green cards, but I really want to try out some of these blue cards and maybe a different leader ability. I can stick with Boba Fett and switch my other leader to Emperor Palpatine to get access to his sort of aristocrat style build, and then use Dagobah Swamp or another blue base for my base. And now I'm still playing Boba Fett. I still get access to my favorite leader or character in the game, but I get a completely different set of tools that I get to use, and I get to completely change how Boba Fett plays for me. And my Boba Fett deck will be different from your Boba Fett deck, not just because I'm using slightly different cards, but because we have a completely different pool of cards that we're pulling from. Not to mention, actually in this game, technically, you can use cards of any color. It just costs you a little bit more. Again, not going to go into it, but this game actually has way more customization than Magic, barring the fact that Magic has 99 more sets than this game. So, you know, there's going to be that factor. They're not quite going to catch up to the sets that Magic has, but in terms of a leader or commander focused expression kind of focused game, there's a lot of customization in that regard. So how does this line up with player expectations? We talked about it. There's no rule 0 that's required. All of our decks are kind of going to be playing on that that similar axis of caring about dealing damage to our opponents in a usually combat oriented way. Again, there's going to be control style decks, aggro decks, mid-range. There'll be decks that use more events, this game's version of spells, or upgrades. You know, you can still build a Voltron style deck. There's still different ways to go about that process. We're not saying, hey, I'm going to be the counter spell deck that just runs combos and ends the game. That isn't really a thing here. This game is built from the beginning to support Twin Suns. One, in that they literally brought on a team to make this multiplayer format, and they work with that team that consults on all the things that they do to make this the best kind of multiplayer for the game. On top of this game, inherently the 1v1 variant of it, you know, the base version of it, Premier is what this format's called, like our equivalent of standard Magic, uses these same systems. You have a leader, you have a base, you pick cards, they pick colors, all of those rules are still the same. You're just adding more players, and you get an extra leader to kind of make the game a bit more. One thing about expectations with Magic that have changed drastically just in the time that I've played is that it is now impossible to keep up with it at all. Some people might like that, some people might dislike it. I think this game you'll find is a bit more stable, at least for now. For the next, I think 4 or 5 years they have planned out. There's going to be 3 sets per year. They'll come out at the same time every year. That's it as of right now. Again, there isn't going to be 67,000 secret layers and 400 commander decks dropped every minute. And part of the built to support it thing too, leaders, unlike commanders, are made from the beginning to be that. There aren't going to be cards that are like, oh, this is a leader I put in my deck. It doesn't really work that way. They either are a leader or they're not, which you can look at as a negative, but considering like legendary creatures and how it's gotten to be such a mess in Magic from my perspective, kind of a lot, and it kind of feels like the idea of a commander being something special in Magic is completely out the window. Legendary creatures are just, they slap it on everything now because they took a game that wasn't about commander and made it about commander. So I think it's a little messy there, but this game is just built to be about this leader deck building expression customization kind of engine. And the last thing is it's Star Wars. The things that you love about Star Wars will be here. If you like it, it's here. It's going to be about Star Wars. I don't expect they'll ever do Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth nonsense. I don't see Disney ever doing that. I think this game is always going to be about Star Wars. So if you don't like that every other set is in a completely different universe that completely goes against what you like about the game, I think you might find there's a bit more stability here. Maybe I've sold you on some parts of this game. I think it's awesome. I love the back and forth nature of it. Again, if you want to learn more about how the game works, check out a video down in the description below about how to play the game. Roughly pretty similar to Commander. You play guys, you attack with your dudes, I hit your dude. One of the cool things about it is I really do like the more Hearthstone inspired direct attacking. I think it makes games more inherently interactive than a game of Magic can be, where it's like, oh, we have to dig for removal. Well, it's like, play your Stormtrooper out. Stormtrooper's kind of removal, right? Hopefully my gushing here has been somewhat coherent. If you're interested in this game at all, let me know down below if you'd like to see more content about it. I can make my own how to play guide or videos talking about decks or whatever. I expect that some of my regular viewers might just totally ignore this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it though. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, go play Star Wars Unlimited.